This video will be a short overview training on Altia PhotoProto. Altia PhotoProto is a plugin to Photoshop, so you do need Photoshop CS4 or later to use Altia PhotoProto. Let's get started with what you can do with Altia PhotoProto. Well, you can actually create multi-screen GUIs right inside of Photoshop. You can create buttons and controls that react automatically when you click them. You can navigate between multiple screens using the buttons you create, and you can even do some prototyping sort of multimedia features like playing an MP3 file or playing back an AVI or movie. Alright, so the creation process in PhotoProto is really just using Photoshop like you normally do. You just create your artwork in layers. But what comes into play is when you start structuring those layers in a certain way, creating layer groups and naming them a certain way. That's where PhotoProto comes alive. So you run the PhotoProto plugin and it analyzes what you have called your Photoshop layers and how you've organized them, and based on that, if it sees keywords and certain structures, it'll start making real objects like buttons. Alright, so some of the things I want to show you is how you can create the usual objects in PhotoProto. The first thing you have to do is make a layer group. That's one of those collapsible folder icons in Photoshop, and that tells PhotoProto, hey, look at me, I might be an object. Do I have a keyword in my name? And if so, make an object. But if you just have layers, it won't think it's an object at all. So it starts with a layer group. But then that name, the name of that layer group is the critical issue. That's where PhotoProto decides, are you an object or not? And those decisions are determined by the keyword at the beginning of the layer group name. Alright, so you can, once you start creating objects in your model, you can start creating multiple objects, of course, and you can have those objects talk to each other. So let's first look at the anatomy of an object layer group name in Adobe Photoshop, so that PhotoProto, Altia PhotoProto will be able to pick it up. The first thing is the keyword. Am I a button? Am I a deck? Am I a slider? These are some of the keywords we'll talk about. And the second word in the layer group name is the animation prefix, or the friendly GUI developer name. So it's going to base this, use this word, the second word, to create your file names, the PNGs it exports for you. And it's also going to use it as animation names in Altia Design, because you can import the output of PhotoProto into Altia Design. Alright, so think of that as your naming convention prefix for that object. This is, in the case of a button, the third word is up, down, or over. Does the button do the fourth word action event either on a mouse down, mouse up, or mouse over? Okay. And then this final event is what the button should fire off. So if you are using PhotoProto to talk to external C code, you would register an event here, the name of an event that the C code is looking to listening for via like a callback function. However, PhotoProto does have some built-in events that allow you to just go ahead and like this, play sound, just have it right there, and it will actually start some audio playing back for you. Okay. So let's go ahead and go through a short list of the common PhotoProto objects that you can build. Of course, you can build buttons and invisible buttons called hotspots. You can quickly and easily create sliders. Now, on the interpolated stimulus knowledge base video for Altia Design, I manually build a slider. So if you watch that video and then you watch this video, you can see that PhotoProto isn't actually building anything that Altia Design cannot already build. It's just it does it more quickly and easily for you. So Altia PhotoProto is not a required product in the Altia toolchain, but it is a big time saver to do a lot of the quick upfront stuff like setting up your screens, creating buttons, making sliders, that sort of thing. Alright. You can also make knobs and decks and even play back videos, whether it's a AVI file that you're playing back or a live webcam stream if you have a webcam on your computer. Alright. Now we're going to come up at the end of this and I'll go through how to make the entire multi-screen purple GUI, as I've shown also in another knowledge base video for Altia Design. While that knowledge base video was 20 minutes to build the multi-screen GUI in Altia Design, it's probably going to take me mere minutes to do it in PhotoProto. So again, watch that other video on Altia Design's method versus the PhotoProto shortcut method to compare and contrast the capabilities. But just before I jump into building that, I want to talk about multiple screens for PhotoProto. A feature of Photoshop is called layer comps, and originally magazine editors used this to lay out different color schemes and layouts for various things in Altia or various things in their editing environment. For magazine cover design A, B, C, they could quickly switch between the layer comps. We actually retooled layer comps in Photoshop. Again, a native Adobe Photoshop feature. We retooled layer comps to define what a screen is. So the layers that are turned on for a given layer comp are objects on that screen, and the layers that are turned off are not going to be on that screen. All right, and so using that method, you can actually set up objects to talk to layer comps, which is screen navigation in PhotoProto, and I'll be showing you that very shortly here. But I just want to mention PhotoProto does have a default action. All right, so if you don't have a keyword, it's not a layer group, it doesn't match any known behaviors, it will just export every single visible layer as an image object. And this is in itself a huge time saver, because instead of having to cut and copy and paste those pieces of image artwork from your Photoshop file and then do like a copy, file new, paste, save as, you can actually just run PhotoProto against just normal layers, and it will not only create all those nice perfectly trimmed PNG files for you, but it remembers where they were on the canvas in Photoshop and puts them in the same place in Altia Design, or in the preview window that pops up when you win PhotoProto. So it remembers where they were as well as creating the files for you. Huge time savers just by its default action. So at this point, let's jump over to Adobe Photoshop, because of course Altia PhotoProto lives within the Adobe Photoshop environment. It is a plugin to Adobe Photoshop, and you need Photoshop CS4 or later to use Altia PhotoProto. All right, so the very first thing I want to do is just create a simple little button. Okay, and the way you can create a simple little button in using Altia PhotoProto is just select the shape that you want to draw and draw it out, and just to give it some sort of appearance here, I'll use the styles palette here in Adobe Photoshop and just choose one of the default styles. Indicate, and so now we have a layer that has a style and it looks sort of like a button. Well, of course, we could call this up, because it might be our up state, and then Control J or right click, duplicate layer. All right, I just made a copy of it, and I'm going to call this down, and really you want your up above the down. Now the up and the down currently look the same, so what I'm going to do is just modify the bevel and emboss on the down state a little bit, but I have to hide the up state first so I can see what I'm changing. And I'll come over here and maybe make this just a little bit less deep and maybe slightly smaller. It doesn't have to be perfect for this quick demo, but I want to make it visually different so it looks like it is being clicked. All right, so having just these two layers and having made just those simple changes, we now press Control G, or we can drag those two layers down to the folder icon. Either way, it creates a new layer group, which is again just Adobe Photoshop native feature. And we start naming that group. So that is the first action I've taken that is non-native Adobe Photoshop usage. This is where we enter into PhotoProto usage by naming a layer group a certain way. So I'm just going to call this button my button, and I can even abbreviate button my BTN up, and maybe I do something like play sound or one of the reserved words. I think I'll choose play sound because that's pretty quick and easy to put on there. And that's all you need to do. Well, there's one more thing you need to do. See how it says untitled here? PhotoProto will not let you run unless you've saved it somewhere. All right. So I will just create a simple folder here called PHPR right on my desktop and just save this as button. Okay. Now, now that it's saved as a PSD file, of course, I can do File, Scripts, Altia PhotoProto, Build Prototype. The default options are fine, so I can just click Run. And not only is it making a real usable button for me, it also exported those buttons and named them exactly what I named them in my layers. So now if I click this button, it plays music. So not only have I created a clickable button, but I've made a button that already does something too. And that's really quick and easy. All right. This window that popped up is actually a preview window for anything that you build using Altia PhotoProto. All right, so taking that concept a little more complex now, I want to build that purple GUI in just minutes, and that'll be the last thing I do in this quick video. to show you that PhotoProto can actually make whole GUIs. So far it's been 10 minutes so far just to kind of lay the groundwork. Now I'm going to build a GUI in a couple more minutes in what took 20 minutes just to do in Altia Design manually. So again, PhotoProto is a big time saver. I'm going to do that by doing a file new. 800 by 40 is fine. And in fact, the way I'm going to build this one, as a contrast to how I built it in Altia Design, I'm not even going to do file new. I'm going to use a built-in Adobe Photoshop script. So this is not PhotoProto, this is Photoshop. And it's called Load Files into Stack. Okay? And you can browse to a location. And I have a location here where I have some images saved down. And I just want to use the same images that I used to create that purple GUI in the 20-minute video I keep mentioning. And I think that's everything I used. The rest I don't need. So I'm just going to click OK and tell the load files into stack script to launch. Again, this is a Adobe Photoshop default feature. Comes built in with Photoshop. So you can always do this, but essentially what it does is it opens up each and every file that you point it to, and it starts combining them into one Photoshop file, into a stack of layers. That's why it's called load files into stack. But we can actually use that as a very, very quick and easy shortcut to bring in all the artwork we need to make this purple GUI. Alright, so basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the background images toward the bottom of my layer stack so I can see through them, right? And then what I'm going to start doing is exactly like I did before. You've got a button navig and a button audio and a button main menu. But I'm going to actually just make those PhotoProto buttons. So all I have to do is control select two of them, control G, I'll do this more in order. First I'll group them, then I'll name them button, okay? And remember I grouped the two navig images, right? So I'm going to call this button btn navig, or I could just name it navig. I don't have to have the btn in the event name. It's just helpful to have it there to remind you what it is. And I'll call this screen navig, okay? And so basically it's going to fire off an event called screen navig when on mouse up. All right. I don't need all this information in the layered name, but I do need the up state above the down state. So I'm going to ensure that the up state is above the down state, and I'm just going to rename them much more simply so they'll be up and down. I'm going to do this for every single button. So main menu, group the two, make sure up is above down, up, down, button, btn back, we'll call this back, up, and screen home, because this will take us back to the home screen. And then just one more time, group these two, put up, above, down, up, down, button, btn audio, up, screen audio. There we go. If I don't fat finger it, right? Okay. So button btn audio up, screen audio, button btn back up, screen home, button btn navig up, screen navig, each with their own up and down state. Now if you're looking at the screen, it might be difficult to tell what's what, and the reason for that is these groups of layers, they're all sitting right on top of each other. So if I hide them, you can see them pop onto the screen one at a time. I'm going to use that to my advantage real quick and just turn this one on, use the select tool, and put this button navig somewhere in the middle of the screen here. And in fact, to really place it correctly, I'll hide these two background images and just place it somewhere that looks nice, kind of like that. And then I'll show my button audio and do the same thing. Oops, forgot to select it here in the list. Grab it here. There we go, and somewhere like that. So that looks pretty good. It doesn't have to be perfectly centered. Looks all right there. And then the screen back, I want in the bottom left corner of both of the screens when I use this. So I'm just going to select that, drag it down to the bottom left, and that looks about good. Okay, so basically we now have the ability to click buttons if we ran PhotoProto on this and have them fire off events, but those events aren't doing anything because there's no screens defined. Remember we said we retooled a feature of Adobe Photoshop called layer comps. we retooled that to define screens. Well, in the Altia Design demo, I actually used the background as the background for all screens. I used this is part of the audio screen as well as the back button, right? And I used this and the back button for the Navig screen. So I'm going to do that same thing, but all in PhotoProto, and just quickly define screens that way. All right, so turning everything off, I'm just going to show my BG main, right? And let's take out the .png in those layer names. That's the downside of that Adobe Photoshop script. It keeps the whole file name instead of stripping the .png, but I'll just take that out so all we see is what we want. And with nothing visible here but BG main, I'm going to click New Layer Comp, and I will call this background. Now background is a reserved word in Altia PhotoProto that creates objects behind everything, behind the multi-screen deck, and gives you a constant background which you can share with other screens. Alright, so that's set up. Now I want to hide that, and I want to turn on BG Navig, okay? And I want to turn on the back button. And I will make a new screen here, and this has to match one of these fourth words so the button talks to it, right? So we want to make it match this screen Navig name, and now we have a layer comp that defines the navigation screen and a layer comp that defines the background. See how those eyeballs are turning on and off? Okay. Let's continue now. We'll leave the back button on, but we'll turn on the audio screen. And actually, while I'm at it, I'm going to put this somewhere more centered. There we go. And so basically, we have still have the back button turned on, this guy down here, and we have the audio, the picture of the audio screen turned on here. And we'll just define that as screen audio. Okay, screen audio. All right, and now all we have to do is define our home screen. Okay, so let's hide everything here, and we'll just turn on the Navig button and the audio button, and we'll define this as screen home. All right, so now we've got a home screen, we've got an audio screen, and we've got a Navig screen. And now if you're curious if there's any order to this list, yes, I usually like to put my background layer below everything just because that's the right order, you know, bottom up, just like in Photoshop. But it's going to create a deck, and inside that deck on each card it's going to put the objects on each screen, and it's going to be card 0, card 1, and card 2. Okay, so if you were curious about the structure of what it will create, that will be it. But guess what, we are all done. The only thing we have to do is save this at a place. Let's put it on the desktop again and PHPR, and I'll just call this perp GUI.psd because it's kind of a purple GUI, right? And now I just run PhotoProto. Okay, we're less than 20 minutes in now. It took me 20 minutes just to make this stuff in Altia Design manually, and I've already given you an overview lesson plus built this multi-screen GUI in less time. So it's done now. It brings up the preview window, and you can click Navig, and you can click back, and you can click audio, and you can click back. Fully rendered functional prototype in just a few minutes. Now to further that, let's go into Altia Design, and I'll just do File New, and I want to show you the actual output of PhotoProto. So if we just go Insert, XML, go to the desktop, to my PHPR, and it gives you a perp GUI assets, and see that it created this XML file. And if you bring it in, you can do a collapse all and expand, and you can see it's groups, and it's got readouts. This is the actual just the control code that comes in. So if you ever want to replace all the control code that PhotoProto built for you, you can just delete that and replace it with C code. And here is the main screen deck. So on card 0, 2 PhotoProto buttons are home and our audio and our Navig button. On card 1, we've got the button to go back and the BG audio. In card 2, we've got the button to go back and the BG Navig. Now these are real objects, just, you know, image objects with the properties, standard image name. But look, it cleanly named everything based upon your layer names in PhotoProto. Okay, so just looking over now, you might recognize these are the same as some of the Altia Design knowledge base videos. you create a deck, and you create 2 cards of that deck. And inside each card you have an image object. Then you add some stimulus, left down and left up, right? To change the deck of the card. Now PhotoProto gives you another little action based upon, over, down, or up, and it's this activate func call. And that's where you can use that control code to fire off whatever you want to do. So if we go and look at that control code, for each button's activate func call event, it does something. And in this case, all it's doing is changing the screen, and that screen is screen main, card 0, 1, and 2. All right. So real objects, real output, real power with Altia PhotoProto.